argue, and I agree with you, that it's, all the money is the taxpayers' money, regardless of who operates it. Just so you know, where I've been getting the negative feedback based on our original meeting, and I assume others have too, is we're operating in a surplus, you're operating in a deficit. So is it prudent to inject money into?
Our deficit will end in about 12 months, and we don't project one for 20 years after, or that's as far as we project. And this was a result of two things, of course, the COET formula, disagreement with the state. You know, the alternative was to sue the state and try to get them to follow the law, and it just didn't think that was a productive way to go at this point. And the recession and the annexation hitting at all the same time. So it's very helpful to us. But I think you can say you have somebody from a township resident who's not a city resident say, why are you doing this? I think you say, look, the money is paid by everybody throughout the township, and we're spending it on a service that applies to everybody throughout the township. And it took me a while to wrap my head around that too. When people suggested it to me, it wasn't my idea. We'd suggest this. I thought, well, that's not going to be received well. And then I realized, it's staying with the people that paid the tax.
So after the one-time, if we should go along with this, and after the one-time injection of the $2.5 million, the following year, your tax base would then go back to funding the 101, and we'd go back to funding the 12.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It's a one-time thing.
That's all I've got.
And thank you for those questions. Those were good questions. They really were.
No, I get it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Members of the Park Board, you're here. Do you have anything to add to what we're talking about? Okay. Yes. Well, since that's a non-action item and
Excuse me, Mr. President, could I just say
Sure,
one
go
word?
ahead.
Everything that everybody said is, from my perspective, is correct. The thing that people need to understand, if we do this, okay, we realize it's a one-time deal, but I don't know, I think everybody got the document from Michael Klitzing at Parks that some of their projects will be held. So things that they were going to do this year and next year will be thrown back some, okay? I just want everybody just to know that. So if you get a phone call or whatever, that they understand that their projections of what they were going to spend for what projects is going to be set back a year or two, okay?
I guess my other concern, I guess, is that the Parks Department set up a strategic plan for 20 years or however many years it is. I believe it was 20 years from 4 or 5 years ago, the one I looked at. And they've held to that, and it has sort of played out fairly well. And I think they're on track to stay to the plan almost to a T. And I guess my question would be, as you brought up, what kind of impact would this have to that master 20-year plan? If things are delayed a year, is that disastrous, or does that push everything else back in your master plan? I'd really like to hear how this would affect you.
When we looked at it last year, the general consensus was that if this was for 1 year, it does push things back, but it's not critical. If it goes on for longer than 1 year, then critical items start being held. Our projection was two things that would probably not happen in the next year or two. Would be one, a dog park, which is in plans, and the second thing is the playground that we've been working on, development on the west side of Central Park. So those will push off into the future. The other factor is how the money's paid out. We're 6 months into the year, which is better, but we did have a concern if that went out lump sum, then that was dipping into cash reserves that we had. But we're far enough into it, I'm not sure how that would play out. We'd have to know more details about it.
Would it have to be a one-time payment, or could it be broken out?
Could it be a partial?
I would think.
Half of it. 1.3 million. Right. Could it be half of it? Since we're 6 months in.
That is a good.
We will be receiving over 2.6 million this year from COET.
Well, so did the city.
Which will go.
You guys received quite a bit of money
which
too
will
from
go.
the COET. Okay, well, I guess that, a good question, since we are 6 months in, do you need the full amount to cover the whole year, or would?
Yes, we're a little better off than we thought we might be 6 months ago. But, yeah, I'd like to stick to the plans right at this point if possible. Now, our goal is, if the economy's going to take off, we'll have lots of extra code in a year or two. We can come back up.
I mean, on a personal note, the dog park's something that's kind of near and dear to my heart. I hate to hear that be something that's pushed back. Of course, we're talking about a much bigger picture in the city of Carmel and Clay Township. But, I don't know. I think, see, I guess what you're saying is some things would be pushed back. It wouldn't critically affect the master plan over the long term, if this happened only one time.
Correct. Over the long term, you're talking about a year delay on some things, maybe a little bit longer on others because you have to get your cash back up. I would like to point out that the one issue that you were discussing earlier already exists in the $1 million reserve, where we had money forwarded to us from the township that has not been spent. So it's in one of our accounts. So that is a possibility in your $1 million reserve, that it can get forwarded, and then what do you do with the other money if it should be returned? When Doug and I talked about it, it didn't make sense to turn around and move it from one account back and then potentially have to do that again in a short period of time.
Madam President, can I add just one
Certainly.
item? And it's just because it hasn't been stated and not everyone will remember the history. Perhaps you know this already, but one thing as you're thinking through this, the bond issue for the Central Park, called Monon Center, was for the whole Central Park. There was a unique agreement on that with the city, and despite the fact that it's a township bond issue, it is that levy that pays the lease, that funds the bond, is collected from every citizen, whether they live in the city or the township, and that was with the agreement of the city. We actually had to enter into an agreement, because that's unusual. Normally, if you would do a township bond issue, in quotes, for parks or something else that the city also has authority to, you don't have the authority to levy the tax within the city limits.
Didn't the city in that relinquish their taxing authority?
Yeah, they did. They relinquished their taxing authority for parks, for a park bond issue, to the township in that circumstance for that bond issue, which was, at the time, others had picked up on it. At the time, it was a very unique solution to try to make something happen. Not two bond issues, not dual bond issues. It was one bond issue by the township, so that all township citizens would pay it, and with the agreement of the city, also within the city. So the mayor sort of said that everybody pays county option income tax. Everybody is also paying the property tax that funds the generation of the county option income tax. Just as you're sorting through this and justifying it to yourself one way or the other, I just wanted to be sure that you had that bit of ancient history now.
Any further discussion? Matt, are you satisfied? Go.
I'm done. We'll continue to. It's good
Paul?
questions. Good questions.
We appreciate the question. Then, since this was a discussion item, we don't need any action on it tonight. We'll move on to the Community Life and Learning Center. Doug?
As you know, the township bought the Community Life and Learning Center up across from the high school a few years ago, and it was purchased through the Lilly Endowment and the township. It's through the township, okay? So we have a position that's come up, or a thing that's come up, where we need to decide on whether we're going to continue running the Community Life and Learning Center or not, and end up selling it, giving away whatever you have, is feasible to do, okay? We've been discussing this for the past couple of years, and this past month I have spoke with Ivy Tech, and I've also spoken to the Carmel Clay Schools Dr. Swanson and Roger McMichael and Steve Yellen's here tonight to answer any of your questions. But I personally feel, and this is my personal feeling, that it's a good fit. The Carmel Place Schools, and that is a good fit. They have all the parking, and as you know, we have no parking up there whatsoever. IUPI stepped out last year, so right now, we are pumping in $100,000 a year out of our COET to support the Community Life and Learning Center. All three of you have felt that there is a need for higher education, and I was amazed when I went to a meeting with Ivy Tech, and there's about almost 3,000 students that go through that school, and that is amazing to me. So you can only imagine what our parking problem is up there. So anyway, the last month, I talked to the schools, I talked to Ivy Tech. My only thing that I would say is Ivy Tech could not wait around until we had this meeting, and I did step up and say, you know, to continue on, and you'll have it for at least another year, and so you guys have to protect me now, okay? But they couldn't wait around any longer. They had to do something. So I gave them the okay, go ahead. We have not signed a contract, a new contract starting, and their fiscal year ends August 31st, or the school year ends August 31st, and the new one starts, of course, September 1st. So we need to decide if we're going to hang on to this, pump the $100,000 of code into it every year, along with Ivy Tech's $150,000 they pump in, and the legacy funds that they pump into it. Personally, again, you know, I like the fit with the high school. Talking with the high school, they talk to a lot of universities. Ball State uses the high school and some of their other schools right now. They work with these other higher education schools. And so I asked them to send somebody down here tonight to discuss this with us. So if we have any questions, we're going to hear, you guys are going to hear it firsthand from the school system. Okay, and then maybe we can make a decision, or maybe you can make a decision on what you hear tonight. And there's a lady from from Ivy Tech here also. Walt Freihofer, our project manager, is here. So we have all of our resources right here to talk about this. So at that time, I'm going to turn it back over to you, Madam President, and feel free. What's your wishes? Where do you want to go from here?
Paul?
Well, when I was chairman last year, I met with Dr. Swenson and Roger McMichael. I've had a couple meetings with them. I have a pretty good feel for what they want to do with the building going forward. I personally don't want to continue to run a deficit and fund that building with COET money. It sounds like we've pretty much committed to Ivy Tech through the end of August of 13, right? 2013?
August 2013.
All right. I personally am interested in continuing to work with the school system and put them in a position to acquire this building after the Ivy Tech commitment is over. Now, I also want to work out an agreement with the school system for what constitutes a fair transfer. What are we talking about? X dollars for them to acquire it. I don't want to get rich on this thing. I certainly don't want to hold anybody hostage. We just spent over $300,000 on a new roof, which we sorely needed, and I think we will continue to have need for renovation and upgrading the building. Obviously, it's getting older. We're going to have to continue to pump money into it. I don't want to run a deficit on operating that building. I also agree that higher education is a good move. Why don't we turn that building over to the school system and let them program higher education in there? They'd have more of an incentive to offer parking across the street in their lot. It would be their liability. I can certainly understand right now why they're not willing to be, with open arms, allow parking over there all the time. There are limits to what they can do. I personally want to see the school system acquire that building.
Mr. McMichael told me that, he says, Doug, after 3 o'clock, on any given day, we have over 3 million square feet of classrooms that these universities can use. All they have to do is come and see us, we'll work with them. He says, you only have 30,000 square feet, and half of that is used by Ivy Tech. So, I mean, I'm thinking, you know, they have everything. You know, the school system, they know how to deal with these universities, you know. But I do believe, and this is one thing I understand why you three have, you know, kind of laid back a little bit, because you believe in that higher education, and that was one of the things I stressed to Roger McMichael about it, and Dr. Swenson both, that how important the higher education. Anyway, like I say, Dr. Dillon's here tonight, and if you got any questions for him too, feel free.
Matt?
Well, I'll go ahead and follow Paul with, where I am on this is I think that it would be a huge disservice to Carmel to lose higher education. I think there's nowhere that a single entity like Ivy Tech, where students from Carmel and Northern Hamilton County can really get to. At the same time, I agree with Paul 100% that running a deficit is not prudent. I heard an idea that, I mean, I would love for Ivy Tech to move into Merchant Square, which is desolate, and they'd have plenty of parking. The idea of using Carmel High School is great. You're absolutely right. After 3 o'clock, it's nearly a ghost town. So my feeling on the matter is, since we've talked about it for a couple years, is I think we should let Ivy Tech know that their time will be up at August of 2013, and pursue getting the building to the school system. With Paul, I don't think we need to get rich on this either. I obviously cover the roof and probably cover a couple years of the deficit and maybe a little more. You know, $500,000 I don't think is out of line for that building, plus whatever we have to put into it. I hate to see the higher education go temporarily, but I love the Carmel school system, and I think they can do right by it.
I think that we need to keep higher education here, and I think it needs to be negotiated as to how we do that. Where the building is going to transfer over, be sold, whatever we're going to do, have a contract written up so that we're sure that's inclusive. I'd be interested to hear your comments, Walt, on who you've talked to. Doug said you've talked to other schools that might be interested. My only concern has been right along that we continue to pour money into the building, that there has to be some money coming back to the township, to the taxpayers, for all the money. I mean, a new roof, and then we turn it over to somebody with no price tag. I think that there has to be some really careful thought on this whole thing.
Just bring up something, and again, this higher education keeps coming up. I will tell you, and I know Mr. Dillon out there will, I'm sure he's heard it from his higher-ups, but I know when I talked to Roger McMichael, he says, heck, he says, we'll give them a 3 more year contract, if that's the case for Ivy Tech. So, I mean, they are really, really not only wanting that building, but they're willing to step up to bring higher education to the Carmel area. So, and again, Mr. Dillon, if you would like to say something, or Walt, both of you.
First of all, let me make a comment about higher ed in Carmel.
Could you say your name?
Yes, I am Steve Dillon. I'm Director of Student Services for Carmel Clay Schools. Thank you for having me here this evening. Carmel Clay Schools has a long tradition in supporting higher education in the Carmel community. Mr. Boland, back when you were on the school board, when Dr. Teagarden was our superintendent, we first hosted classes at Carmel High School, Clay Middle School, and Carmel Middle School from IUPUI and I believe Ivy Tech at that time, when that building was still the library for Carmel. So that has been a tradition for us for years, and we, as Mr. Callahan just said, we would be interested in entering into discussions with Ivy Tech and other universities for a continuing presence in Carmel. One of the things that we are currently exploring in Carmel, and you may have read some of Dr. Swenson's articles about high-performing schools being allowed by the state of Indiana to do some interesting things, such as a senior semester. We are exploring those opportunities right now, building relationships possibly with Indiana University, Purdue University, Ball State University. We feel like a large percentage of our seniors, before their second and last semester of their senior year begins, have already been accepted to those Indiana universities. Wouldn't it be a wonderful program to bring some of those classes to Carmel, allow our students to begin their college career while still being enrolled at Carmel High School? Be a great location for a program like that. We currently rent space to run our Carmel Learning Center, which you have in the past graciously helped us get started years ago. And we have to rent space now because we don't have space for that. That building would be a prime location for us to move that program to and give us the ability to expand that program and possibly partner with our friends Ivy Tech to help get some of our alternative students some college education opportunities while still attending high school. So as you can tell, our minds have been working for several years now about what would we do with this building, and I can tell you right now we'll run out of space before we ever run out of ideas on how to use a facility like that with its location being at Carmel. Parking, as you said, is a concern for that building. I took a tour over there last week and just kind of walked around and looked at the facility. But we do have parking that we could adjust, and if it was our building, more appropriately address those parking considerations. So.
Any questions on that, Paul?
No, I think we all
Matt?
pretty clear.
I do have a question that concerns the community groups that use the room before the building really is open for the students each day. Would that be something that you would still consider doing? I've been asked that by a couple of the groups that are using the
I
building.
wasn't aware that any community groups use that, but I can tell you that at the Educational Service Center, where my offices are located on Main Street, we have many community groups that use our facilities. The Dad's Club, for instance, uses that facility for meetings. The Carmel Education Foundation uses that facility. So we already have a tradition of working with our community and allowing groups into our facilities. I would not see that as a problem.
Okay. They are concerned, so they get moved around a lot.
I understand that. Meeting space is valuable, and we have lots of groups that use our facilities throughout our district.
Great. Any further? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
The next action item is certification.
Excuse me just a
I'm
second,
sorry, go ahead.
Madam President. Did you want Walt? Do you have any questions for Walt?
I offered you
Or
a
did-
chance earlier, and I thought maybe you weren't interested in speaking. so
No, I'm happy to
please
speak.
feel
You.
free to.
My name is Walter Freihofer. I am with Freihofer Incorporated, which is the property management company that's been overseeing the management of that asset on behalf of the township for the last 2.5 years. You asked me the question, who else has shown an interest in the building? If you'd like to hear that answer, I'd be
That'd be
happy to
great.
answer.
Thank you.
There are a number of other colleges, universities in the immediate area. I have talked with Dave Tucker at Vincennes University. The Achilles heel of this building is simply the parking. And whether you're talking about community groups that would like to utilize the building, or the great success that both Ivy Tech and IUPUI had in their holding classes in that building. The rooms are already set up for it. There are a lot of very strong assets to that. The one negative is the parking. And the reason that anybody is going to either be interested or not be interested is if they can't have their students park there, then they simply can't get people to enroll, and therefore causing a problem. I would tell you that I think Carmel High School has the answer to that, and being able to share that parking would be a big benefit, and would be go a long way in having people other than Ivy Tech or IUPUI or Vincennes or any of the other colleges that are in business for profit today to hold classes there. We did study just a little bit the opportunities to add parking to that, and the cost associated with that is expensive at a minimum, but we did look at that on a very cursory basis.
Has anybody ever, and I don't mean this to sound insensitive, and I'm in this building probably every other month for a function, I've never attended a service there, has anybody ever approached the church, or would an entity large enough such as Carmel be able to have the buying authority to relocate that church for, I mean, has there ever been conversation with them?
Well, as you're aware, we lease spaces from them currently.
Parking spaces.
Parking spaces. As it relates to the ability to have someone condemn that and take it, I would have to have you talk to your counsel in that regard.
I think there's been discussion on that building for years. They like being where they are.
And the financial issue today, and where you're making that up, is the fact that IUPUI, having left, partially because of the parking issue, the building, for lack of better terms, is being half occupied at this point. There's a lot of room, but how you then reutilize, and I would tell you that if you abide by the agreement that Doug made with Ivy Tech, and I went to that meeting as well, I think the school would start to utilize that space before, or had the ability to utilize that space well before the August of 13 timeframe that was contemplated in terms of turning it over to them. You may be able to turn the building over, sell the building earlier, with the understanding that they'd be obligated to honor the contract that Doug would execute with them prior to that. Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other thoughts on this before we move to the next item? Certification of updated LOIT distributions for 2011, 2012.
As you know, we've received some additional COIT money for 2011, and it increased our monthly draw from the state for 2012 at $55,000 a month. So what I did is, this is just kind of information for the three of you. If you look at the back where it's got the breakdown of the interest from 2011 COIT plus what the 2011 COIT we were shorting, which was undistributed. And then we have the interest on 2012 COIT for the first 4 months, and then how much they need to catch up January through April, which gives us a grand total that we received from the state of $754,000. At the present time, I've talked to DLGF, and they have told me just to place it in the bank account, or in our bank account, and not divide it up into the funds yet, because they are supposedly going to tell us where we need to direct those funds. Now, I do have a little bit of a problem with that, because 61% of that goes into the 1215 fund, the fund we've been talking about. So I will, once they let us know, then I will respond to that and get that corrected. Most of it is the fire COIT. It goes to fire, and the most of it is the 1215 fund, which we've been discussing tonight. And then the other majority of it will be for the fire fund, especially for Southwest Clay that we received. So, but we'll take care of that with the fire fund, is once we get into a contract with the fire contract with the city.
What's the
we'll take care of that.
surplus, Doug, after we've paid out the percentage to the Parks Fund and to the fire fund? What would our surplus be from that total windfall?
Well, what we have figured up is kind of the breakout is you're looking at about the fire, I'd say it's probably around, it's less than 100,000, the rest of it.
And we're waiting on somebody
DLGF will let us know where that money needs to go. They, just like every time we receive COIT, when they send out our 1782 notice and our budget order, they will tell us, first of all, we get the 1782 notice. They say, okay, this is where all the money's going to go, what fund, and how much in each fund, and that includes COIT. Because when we do the budget at the middle of the